From Fisherman to Founder. That's the overarching theme for our reflections over these coming weeks and months as we together journey with Peter from being a humble, ordinary fisherman on the Sea of Galilee to being the founder of the early church. It was amazing the way Peter changed from being an unreliable, impetuous hothead to become a rock upon which Jesus could and did build his church. And in our reflections today, we want to touch briefly on the character of Peter as we continue to meet Peter and get to know Peter. When we first meet Peter in the Gospels, we see a man with not a small number of character faults. He was a bit of a loudmouth. He put his foot in it often. He was boastful. He lacked humility, and he was unstable. And you might wonder, understandably, why Jesus would want Peter at all for a disciple. But then many of the other disciples, to be frank and to be fair, were not much better. But I think Peter was a generous man. I think he was warm, he was outgoing, he was enthusiastic. He was a man, for sure, of strong emotions, and he was a natural leader. But most important of all, he was devoted to Jesus. His good qualities and his not so good qualities were essentially two sides of the same coin. And guess what? We're exactly like Peter. We have both strengths and we have weaknesses. And Peter learned, as we need to learn too, that our personalities need to be submitted to God so that the Holy Spirit can work to produce the fruit of the Spirit, those good and godly, Christ-like qualities and characteristics within us. Peter was impulsive. Well, that's certainly one word you would use to describe him. When a new situation arose, you could always guarantee it would be Peter who would jump in with both feet. Remember when Jesus walked on the water, it was Peter who said, "Lord, command me to come to you on the water." And before you could say Jack Robinson, Peter stepped out of the boat and walked across the water toward Jesus and began to sink. Now that is impulsive behavior. Impulsive behavior was also seen on the night that Jesus was arrested when Peter whipped out his sword and attacked the servant of the high priest. Peter was impulsive. He was always the one who spoke up first. Now, sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes that got him into hot water. Peter was impulsive. And Peter often used inappropriate words. Consider, for example, when he was at the Transfiguration and Jesus is shining out with divine light and speaking to Moses and Elijah. He's there with the two other disciples, James and John, who are struck silent, struck dumb with awe. But it's Peter who opens his mouth and comes out with whatever's in his mind. "Lord, it's good for us to be here with you up the mountain. Let's make 3 little tents, one for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for you." He didn't really know what he was saying. And what was he doing anyway? Interrupting the conversation that Jesus was having with no less than Moses and Elijah. Shut up, Peter. Peter used inappropriate words. Peter's reaction often was to open his mouth without engaging his brain. He often acted and spoke without thinking. And that could have well disqualified him from being the leader of the early church. But apparently, Jesus saw things differently. Jesus saw what Peter, through his character, was capable of becoming a rock upon which he would be able to rely. Yes, Peter was arrogant and boastful too. Peter was always likely in his enthusiasm to bite off more than he could chew. He was arrogant, he was boastful, he claimed that he loved Jesus more than any of the others, that he would be the one that would be more loyal to Jesus. Jesus had said how all his disciples were going to leave him when he was arrested. And what did Peter say? All of them might run away. Lord, I'll not run away. I'll be there. Well, we know what happened next, don't we? Peter was in for a rude awakening. Because when it came down to the nitty-gritty, when Jesus was actually arrested, Peter took to his heels and left the scene. Later we read how Peter denied Jesus 3 times in order to save his own skin. Where was all his boasted loyalty? It was nowhere to be seen. When the cock crowed, that was a wake-up call, literally and metaphorically for Peter. He remembered the words of Jesus. And what did he do? He went out and cried his eyes out. It was a testing time for Peter. It became the turning point of his life. He realized that he had failed to be a rock. He had not lived up to the nickname, as it were, the Lord had given him. And yet, by the time, as we'll see in coming months, that we get to the epistles of Peter, 1 Peter and 2 Peter, toward the end of the New Testament, written when Peter was getting to be an older man, we see the character of Peter, the honed, sharpened, and almost polished character of Peter, one who has learned the lesson of humility, one who has learned the lesson of submission to God, and one who has learned the importance of being prepared to suffer for the sake of the gospel. In his youth, Peter had been as unstable as jelly. But in his maturity and through the work of God in his life, Peter became the rock on which the church was built. He had been a young man when he first met Jesus, probably only in his early 20s. He had been full of enthusiasm, immaturity, pride, and all these other characteristics we've documented. But God took hold of him, and Jesus changed him, and he became Peter the rock. Jesus saw what the character of Peter, this failure, this fisherman, could become. He was to become the founder of the early church.